Welcome back to the Gun Collective podcast. My name is Jon Patton, and boys and girls, I have something really interesting to share with you today. My guest is Kai Kloepfer of a company called Biofire. Now, unless you are a lame wad and don't watch TGC News, you may have missed our coverage and, of course, Forgotten Weapons coverage of this very new smart gun with a different approach than some of the things we've seen in the past. And before we get into that, I want to say a quick shout out to our sponsor, Blackout Coffee. If you go to blackoutcoffee.com/TGC, use our code TGC, you get a little discount. You buy some great coffee. We have a signature blend called Tenacity. If you don't like coffee, get some tea, some hot cocoa. It's beautiful. Tea this time of year is primo. And of course, check out Vertex. Use our code TGC over at vertex.com. They've got the new VTAC stackable storage for vehicles. They've got new gun cases you're going to love. And speaking of guns, let's get into the mechanics of this gun. Kai, how are you doing today? You all right?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, John.
Dude, I'm pumped that you took the time to jump on here. Like we were saying a minute ago, I think a lot of people hear the words smart gun and immediately just revolt. Based on the track record and the potentials behind it that we'll get into a little bit later, people tend to put their guard up. But I want to understand the gun first. So for those that have never heard of this thing, do not understand it, try and describe what it is. Yes, it's a 9mm, but what is the gun? How does it work, etc.?
Totally. So the Biofire Smart Gun, I actually brought one here, and we can talk about it a little bit for
Perfect.
Folks awesome. The video. But the Biofire Smart Gun is basically, as you said, 9mm semi-auto striker-fired handgun, basically designed to ensure that it's always going to be locked by default.
So when you say locked, what do you mean by that?
Unable to be fired if there's a round in the chamber, basically.
Okay.
So obviously, any sort of any traditional firearm that you might own, if that firearm is loaded appropriately, has the magazine inserted around the chamber, all that kind of stuff, and you pull the trigger, you sure hope it's going to shoot. Basically, our product,
yeah, that's ideal.
if anybody other than the owner or some of the owners chosen is handling the firearm at the time that the trigger is being pulled, it's not going to fire. But at the same time, one of the things we care a lot about is ensuring that the firearm is always going to be usable instantly for the actual owner, right? Like I'm a big owner myself, and I would say as somebody who owns firearms for home defense, which is I think really the kind of the key place where we see this technology potentially being useful.
Sure. Especially on this iteration. For those that are listening and maybe haven't seen the gun, it is what I would call a full size and maybe even larger than full size. It physically appears quite similar to the Silencer Co. Maxim 9. Maybe not, the front end is not quite as big, but it sort of has that sort of heft and chunk, a la like a Halo blaster almost. It's sort of got that vibe to it.
Totally. And I'd say we've made some very deliberate choices kind of throughout our product development process to optimize for particular use cases, right? And we definitely have chosen to optimize for the home defense use case, right? Even if that makes it a very uncomfortable concealed carry product or something like that. That's definitely something that we focus quite a bit on. But basically, I can show you sort of the basic intent here real quick.
Let me make you big for the video viewers. I'll make you right dead
I'll
center.
voice over it as I go through.
All right.
Oh, cool. Look at that. That's more than I really want to see, probably. All right. So we've got, again, this is one of the Biofire Smart Guns here. It's one of our pre-production prototypes. It's basically always locked by default. And so you can see here, we've got to kind of get this glass back here as well as the front sight. You notice both of those dark, just looks like a normal firearm. As soon as I start to interact with it, basically, have a grip around it, you're going to see that it wakes up and you see those kind of white lights.
So to slow it down a touch, we've got sort of a sensor on the back of the grip as well as on the back of the rear of the gun where like a striker plate might be. Is that like a touch sensor on the grip itself?
Yeah, we've actually got a bunch of different sensors built in the grip that we're using to determine whether or not you're holding onto it. You can see one of them here, but there's some more on the front here.
Okay. So we've got sort of an array of sensors.
Yes. Yeah, and the sensors basically, there's kind of two different kinds of sensors that we have in the product. One is what I'd call like biometric sensors, right? So we've got a fingerprint sensor set here on the side, basically, which would be underneath the middle finger of your dominant hand. And we offer both right and left hand configurations in a variety of different sizes to make sure it's going to fit anybody.
Is it possible to do an ambidextrous version of that? is that possible with the electronics required?
That's a great question. So that actually brings me to the next comment, which is we've also got a 3D facial recognition system on the back here. This system is set up so that either the fingerprint or the facial recognition can be used to unlock the system. They actually both run simultaneously as soon as you pick it up. So the fingerprint right now, we're only going to be offering models that have it on one side or the other. So like we'd encourage you to, basically pick the one that's going to be your primary kind of dominant hand.
Sure.
But it works just as well with your offhand. Or an ambidextrous use case where maybe like your partner is left-handed, you're right-handed, or vice versa. All of that, because the facial recognition system is not based on what side of the grip the fingerprint sensor is on, I would say we just haven't seen enough demand for the additional kind of complexity and cost that adding another fingerprint sensor would. But certainly, if that's something folks are looking for, we'd love to hear from them.
Sure, and I mean, to be fair, I would say that 99% of AR-15s out there are right-hand dominant setups, so that makes sense.
Yeah, not the ones I have, but yeah, I have some of the ones that have some nice ambidextrous controls on them. But you're correct that the vast majority of firearms are going to be right-handed. So basically, as I was kind of like going through previously, as soon as you start to interact, that you get those white lights, and they adjust brightness automatically depending on what kind of environment you're in. So if you're in the middle of the night in the dark, you don't need to worry about them lighting up your face or anything like that. And then basically, as soon as you grip it properly, you'll see it unlocks. And that process happens extremely quickly. And here, I try to get a little bit less of the glare on it there. That process happens extremely quickly. Our objective is, we say instant. And what we mean by that is we want to make sure that it's always going to be unlocked as soon as you pick it up. And so I'm doing it kind of artificially here, holding it midair. But if I was to, put the firearm down the table and pick it up, as soon as I pick it up, it's going to be unlocked.
Wow, that is genuinely fast.
Yeah, there's about $30 million of research and development work in this product. I sure hope it's fast. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. I sure hope it's fast.
No, it's totally fine to swear. I think that is a shitload of money.
It's a lot of money. Yes, and there's a lot of technology here going on under the hood. The last part I'll show, which I actually think is really the key part, all the biometrics and stuff. Again, they're great. We've spent a lot of money trying to make them really reliable, but all they really do is just turn this back into a normal firearm from an operational perspective. The key part is, as you have that, you see this visible laser there as well. That's an option. We'll talk about that probably a little bit. But as you have the firearm unlocked, the key part, the reason why somebody might buy a smart gun over a traditional firearm is the peace of mind and the confidence that it's always going to be locked when it leaves their control. And so you'll see here, as I let go of this, within less than 100 milliseconds on average, oftentimes much faster, it unlocks. And that's actually the key part, because really as fast as I can have this taken out of my hands or something like that, it's going to be locked, let alone sort of more standard.
For those listening, this is almost, so he's got these lights on the front sight and on the rear of the gun, and he is repeatedly removing a hand and placing it back on the gun, and it is almost instantaneous. He said within 100 milliseconds. Obviously I'm watching through remote video, but it looks really, really fast. And that's pretty impressive, Guy. I got to be honest. Wow.
I promise there's no video editing going on here.
All right. I freaking hope so.
Yeah, that'd be kind of more impressive if I could live edit the video as we're doing this. But no,
yeah, that would be that's where the 30 million went.
Exactly. No, I sure hope not. Yeah. So basically, like the intent here is, Biofire is like, we're a team of gun owners. Almost all of our engineering team and most folks that work here have owned firearms personally in a variety of capacities, whether that's or our veterans, et cetera. And our goal is, we want to build a product that we would trust, right? I think to your previous comments, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more in a little bit, like the fundamental thing that I think nobody's ever gotten right about a smart gun prior to Biofire is building a product that's actually fundamentally reliable, right? Because if you're going to bring a firearm to your home and expect to use that in some sort of unpredictable defensive situation, you do need to have confidence that one, it's going to always unlock and be usable just like any other firearm would. But at the same time, you also need to have confidence that if you're relying on that to ensure your kid's not going to get access to it, et cetera, or not going to be able to fire it, you need to have just the same degree of confidence on that on the other side as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a scenario where it would be acceptable, even at the range. If it would not matter to me if it did not unlock 100%, it would be a step behind regular mechanical firearms and therefore not worth the cash, arguably. So I think that's a pretty important fact here. So backing up just a touch, how many rounds are in the mag?
15 round mag.
Okay, and the barrel length on this thing?
It's about a 5-inch barrel.
Okay, so we
We
got
have full
a
detail specs on our
5-inch
website.
barrel, 15 round mag, takes regular 9 mil. Does it feed hollow points? Okay, have you tested a plethora of those?
We've tested a whole bunch. As we get closer to sort of final production, we'll publish kind of like our recommended ammunition list, just like everybody else does. But it's a defensive firearm, and certainly I would recommend that you're using hollow point in any sort of indoor environment for home defense, unless you want your FMJ going through walls. So
And they
I would
will.
say,
They will.
oh yeah, and hollow point will too, but they tend to go through a lot less walls. And so yes, like the goal here is we've tested it not just for like the home defense environment use cases, but also for what happens if you were to step back outside in the rain? What happens if you live in Alaska in the middle of winter, right? And it outside is really, really, really cold, or you live in Arizona in the middle of summer and outside is really, really hot, right? Like all the sort of stuff where this is not, I'm going to say like it would work, but my recommendation, we're not designing this product for it to be something that you go hiking with as a as a sidearm, but or to fight off bears or anything like that. But if you're using 9 mil for that, I think you got bigger problems. But I would say the objective is we want to cover any possible kind of use case or environment that you could see yourself in for home defense.
Okay, so what about something like could you take a very strong like neodymium magnet, slap it on the side of that thing, and have it distort some sort of signal? I don't know what's inside there. I don't know what's possible with a magnet. Is that something that is a potential threat to this firearm?
Short answer is no, but not by accident, right? We've done a lot of work to ensure that
Sure.
it's very, I would say, like tamper resistant.
Right, and that's
And
the reason I ask these questions is so that I'm basically trying to act as devil's advocate, so to
oh,
speak,
for sure.
to ask the questions my audience would answer
No,
or ask
I
rather.
think this is a very reasonable question, right? When
Yeah,
you
so
look at what happens if you get nuked, then we'll have a more conversation. But yeah.
so short of a EMP situation, there's very little that could break that gun. Is that the idea?
Yes. Yeah. So basically, the way I always like to describe it is, you get a sledgehammer and you have enough time, you could probably cause it to not work. Right. Like definitely there's not, it's susceptible to mechanical damage, just like any other firearm. We want
Sure.
to make sure it's no more susceptible, right? So it's not any more susceptible to getting sand and grit into it. It's not more susceptible to magnets or anything like that. Anything you could do that would destroy a traditional firearm will almost certainly destroy ours as well. But
Okay.
beyond that, no, the goal is like, it should basically, one of the key, maybe stepping back a second, one of the key sort of product design philosophies that we hold here at Biofire is we want this to be very seamless. And what I mean by that is if you know how to use a traditional striker fired handgun, you should be able to just pick our product up and it will work for you, right? There's no, you shouldn't have to learn any new muscle memory, any new
Yeah, I
technique.
mean that's the idea. Any new smart gun, I can't believe people didn't get that. For the last 20 years of this being attempted, it's got to at least that's like bar none. That's got to start there. It has to be as good or easier to use than what exists on the market.
Well, and I think not only like, do I obviously agree with that, like even beyond that, for example, a question we get a lot is, or not, I've gotten a couple times is, well, does the smart gun actually retain the magazine right in the magazine well, or can I remove the magazine just like I would any other firearm, right? I'm sorry, like retain it from an electrical perspective, right? Like we've got
I
a
see.
mag
I
catch,
see.
just like any other. Sorry, the camera's mirrored, just like any other firearm. But the basically we had some people like, well, if I'm going to rely on this technology to prevent my kid from getting hold of it, like I also want to make sure that they're not playing with it and stripping rounds out of it. I have my answer to that is your kid should never be playing with your gun, even if it's a smart gun, and you should be storing it more securely than that. But we actually prototyped that. Basically, like, could we electromechanically kind of lock the magazine or like lock the slide to prevent somebody from like stripping rounds? And we actually found that certain, like some novice users were fine with it, but our expert advisory team that are all like special forces operators like hated it, right? Because it changed the muscle memory of like how a malfunction drill happens and some of the details around how you actually handle the firearm. And so we actually, like, when I say it operates the same way, like you have a slide catch, it does exactly the same thing as every slide catch you've ever seen. You have a mag catch that does the same thing as every mag catch you've ever seen. The actual slide itself is a little bit different, right? We're only basically the back portion of it recoils, the front portion of it's fixed.
Okay.
But other than that, like basically the entire operating mechanics is very similar.
Are you using a dual spring scenario in the top portion to handle recoil? So basically, for those that are listening, the rear portion of the gun is the actual slide, similar to, say, like a Browning Buckmark or a Ruger Mark IV or something like that. Very small slide reciprocating mass here. How are you handling recoil? Is the spring contained in the front end?
Yeah, so maybe just to clarify, we actually have a full length slide underneath this, right? So
Oh, okay.
the slide extends
Interesting.
the entire length here. The difference is this front piece here basically covers the slide and is non-reciprocating. So basically, and this is sort of hard to do on camera, but if I were to like basically pull the slide back here, you see a traditional kind of slide action there. Internally, it's like a short action recoil with like a falling block, which is a little bit different than like your average like Browning tilt lock. But basically, the general concept is very, very similar. And so we have a similar amount of reciprocating mass, a similar sort of spring design, things like that. And I think Ian's video gets into a little bit of that as well. But the basic concepts are very similar. The difference is by having this non-reciprocating area up front, one, that's what allows us to do sort of that illuminated front sight that I showed previously, as well as we intend to offer a variety of other options kind of for this front portion, which we call a flyover cover, that have, red dot sights, a variety of other accessories built into them that are fully integrated into the power system and the network of the gun. And so you get a bunch of cool features that you wouldn't be able to get with just a sort of traditional kind of red dot.
So what you figured out is how to make a video game gun in real life. Is that is that accurate? Because you're talking about features of feeding the optic off of the power of the firearm. That's interesting. What's the capacity like of the batteries inside this firearm? How long do they last?
Yep. So, I'd say like a kind of average use case. So maybe you go to the range every other weekend, shoot 50, 100 rounds. Like you're not going to some 3-day, all intensive training camp, but you're also not like just leaving it in a drawer. We expect you should see months of battery life off of a single charge. Charging it happens kind of automatically whenever it's inserted into the smart dock, which I actually don't have one with me today. But basically what that is it's a sort of charging cradle and configuration interface, right? So it gives you a 5-inch touchscreen interface. It's a lot more secure than just using like a smartphone app or something like that. In fact, the product has no wireless connectivity of any kind for somewhat obvious security reasons. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a little bit.
That's you sort of already sparked another question. That's interesting.
And so we'll talk about all that in a second. But basically, the smart dock charges the gun anytime that it's inserted into it, which basically means that you get a couple months of battery life, again, depending on exactly how you use it, after you remove it from the dock. And so basically, our objective is, back to what I was saying previously, where reliability is the number one key thing here. Really, I think reliability is a very expansive sort of opinion in our case, right? Like it's not just what's the actual technical reliability of the system, but also like, are we designing it in such a way that like a normal user that's doing a reasonable thing is going to have a reliable experience? And I think that extends the battery life, right? This should not be an Apple Watch or something like that, where you could easily forget to charge it. Because the implications of forgetting to charge your Apple Watch is like pretty minimal. Your implications of forgetting to charge your gun is like quite significant. And so we've done a whole lot of work around how to minimize that piece, I would say. This is what it looks like, by the way, if you take it off. That's the
all right. Let me make you full screen again for the video, guys.
And so you can basically see that's what the slide looks like there, and then the flyover cover.
Are you able to rack the slide with that cover off so people can see?
Yeah, sure. There's a pin missing, so basically the whole slide will reciprocate just like you would see on any other slide.
Here, that's fantastic. I thought I thought you just had like some bar sort of closer to like a Desert Eagle where a lot of the mass is in the rear, but no, it's a full length slide.
Yep. Yeah.
Will the smart features work without that cover on? Is that possible?
Sure.
You wouldn't have a front sight, obviously, but
yeah, if I slam the slide forward right now, the slide's going to go flying off. So I would say like it's designed to be part of the system to kind of hold everything together. Like it holds the battery in and all that. So it certainly wouldn't be my recommendation, but in theory, it probably
in theory, yes. So when you drop this thing into the dock, do you have like contacts on the front similar to like a smartwatch where you would just drop it in and then it's the dock for those listening? It's sort of got like for lack of a better term, a built-in holster, and you would slide the gun down in. It's got a little screen on it as well, and that's like I was saying, that's where you sort of set the gun up.
Yeah, so basically I can sort of point this right sort of
Yeah.
here. There's a waterproof USB port in there.
Oh, look at
You see
that. Okay.
USB-C port. So that's the only way to talk to the gun. And even that, from like a security perspective, the gun basically doesn't trust anything that's plugged into it, right? So it doesn't trust the dock, it doesn't trust anything else. All of the biometric data, the decisions about whether or not somebody should be added or removed as a user, all happen locally inside of the gun, and all of them are controlled with the owner's biometrics, right? So if you want to add a new user, for example, the owner has to basically log into the gun with their biometrics, and then the new user has to enroll their biometrics directly in the firearm. And the dock, the touchscreen on it, kind of guides you through the process to make it very intuitive. But all the information is actually never leaving the firearm.
That was something that I found fascinating, and we're definitely going to dig into the smart side of this in a second. But I have one more question that has just been nagging me since I saw that screen. What material is that screen on the back made of? Because one of my biggest concerns is, especially if you're carrying the firearm. Again, you talked about a home defense thing where you're probably not going to have this thing in a holster. It would require a very unique holster anyway. But in the off chance that something does strike that screen on the back, will it still function? Is it like a sapphire? What are you using as a material to protect that?
It's a good question. So I give you a partial answer, which is the system is designed to be very, very impact tolerant on any surface, including with sharp impacts. Any sort of blunt impact, you'll be totally fine. We've designed sort of this rear carrier to basically protect all the edges of the display. Of the rear element here. What I will say, just as a clarification point, this is not a screen. It's just
Sorry.
There's an important difference there, which is a screen is like laminated and there's a whole bunch of different layers going on to it. This is basically just a protective covering for the facial recognition system mostly, as well as kind of that rear user interface. You can see kind of the primary indicator here, but if there is some sort of like warning or low battery, they would also appear as icons down here.
So basically your gun has an iPhone notch.
Pretty much. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Got it.
Almost exactly the same thing. So I would say is I can't unfortunately disclose the final production material for that piece because it's still under evaluation. But the intent is definitely, and what I've seen in our testing is, you should see something like a sapphire crystal that is going to be extremely impact tolerant.
Sure.
In fact, this particular unit has a sapphire crystal in it. I'm just not promising that's going to be the final production material because we're evaluating some other kind of more interesting materials that might be slightly better.
Okay, so you talked about final production. This is still prototype. Final checks are happening right now. What's your delivery date on? I think it was the launch edition you called it. When is that getting delivered?
Yeah, so we have basically a founders edition that we've long sold out of, which will be the very, very first ones to ship. That was quite a premium price point, et cetera. Those will be shipping starting Q4 of this year. It'll be late this year, but I think we're on track to get some out Q4 of this year. And then the launch edition will be starting to ship kind of early Q1. And then sort of the standard $14.99 price point, just smart gun, will be shipping as we move into kind of Q2 of next year. And it's first come, first serve within each of those editions.
So you are, if anybody out there is listening, they're looking at the middle of next year before they actually get one, if they order when they hear this. Is that safe to say?
I'd say like probably like Q2, late Q2 is our current projection for folks that are ordering now. But we're getting a whole bunch of orders, and as we get more and more orders, the timeline does kind of keep pushing out, unfortunately.
I call 100% BS on any timeline that I'm told, regardless of what company is putting it out. The gun industry is very good at saying, "Oh yeah, this will be ready, for SHOT Show next year," and then it's 3 years later it actually comes out. Now I'm not calling you a liar. I'm just saying, pad your expectations.
That's fine. I would say we're. We made some very different choices about how to approach this. So you're welcome to be skeptical, and I'm excited to prove you wrong. But I would say we made some very deliberate choices to basically not start talking about this until we were pretty much in production, which is about 3 years later than when most people start talking about their new products.
Well, you know what? I remember seeing some video of you, and I learned this after I did my piece. I remember seeing a video of you probably 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. And then to find out that was the same, like you're the same guy. I mean, you've been doing this.
Years. Yes.
11 years you've been working on this. Yeah. I mean, if one gun, guys, 11 years.
Yes. Well, for what's worth, it hasn't been quite this one gun for 11 years. We've gone through about 500 generations of prototypes, but yes.
I mean, air quotes, aggressive air quotes on one gun. Is that safe?
Yeah, that works. Yeah.
Okay, so what is your background in sort of tech? So we talked about this, like the mechanics of the gun, how it functions.
Mhm.
What is your background? Like, why are you the guy to bring this to the masses? Why is it you?
Totally. A couple different answers to that. I would say I got into this initially, I would say very much from like an engineering perspective, if that
Okay.
makes sense. I actually started working, I grew up here in Colorado. I actually started working on it right kind of in the wake of the Aurora theater shooting. And just to be very clear,
Oh wow. Okay.
this technology would not have prevented the Aurora theater shooting. That's not the intent. But for me, that was sort of the catalyst to start thinking about how could I apply my engineering sort of thinking and knowledge and skill set to the challenge of guns as opposed to just sort of other things I had been looking at the time. Just to be clear, I was 15 at the time. I was a sophomore in high school. And so started working on it as a science fair project, right? Definitely never intending to build a company or even really a real product out of it. And I would say it over the years sort of just snowballed. I ended up doing quite well at the science fair internationally. And then that turned into a research project for a while. And then I ended up spending a couple years at MIT working on a double major in electrical engineering, computer science, and then management. And then eventually took what's called a Thiel fellowship, where Peter Thiel, who's the one of the billionaire founders of PayPal, basically pays you $100,000 to drop out of college and work on a startup. It's a good deal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so ended up taking that deal and founding Biofire kind of full time, initially out in Boston, having just left MIT back in basically 2018. And then we moved the company out here to Colorado at the beginning of 2020. And then we've basically been focused on building our production product, which is what I'm showing you today, since the beginning of 2020.
Wow. That is a unique ride to get where you are. That is very unique.
Yeah.
How old are you now? You
26.
I mean,
Yes. So 11 plus
years
15.
old.
Yeah. My math is internally consistent, at least. Yes.
I'm approaching old enough to be your dad. I'm 39. I'm approaching it. I said,
Yeah,
calm
you're
down.
right.
Calm down in the comments. I think it is effing fascinating that you have really dedicated so much of your mental bandwidth to not just this project but this sort of movement. Because while it is a singular product, it carries the weight of a lot of things with it. And one of the things I thought was really fascinating is looking at your website. When I started doing the research for the news, I found that it comes across more as a tech website. Thank God for that. The gun industry is full of bad websites, but the idea was that you're showcasing a tech product rather than a gun. And I thought that was an interesting approach. Why did you do that?
It's a good question. I would say like the easiest answer is because we're a tech company. And don't get me wrong, we build guns, and like we're only planning on building guns. We don't have any other products, right? Like I think like at the end of the day, like we're a firearms manufacturer. There's a reason we're a member of NSSF, et cetera. It's like because we're definitely do consider ourselves part of the gun industry. At the same time, from like a approach perspective, our approach has very much been one of a tech company, right? And the reason why is I think one of the sort of fundamental reasons why this technology has not existed prior to Biofire, or substantively existed prior to Biofire, is because nobody has ever been able to build an engineering team with the right kind of skill set to actually, build a piece of technology like this that's reliable enough, right? The basic premise of I'm going to take a fingerprint sensor and slap it on a Glock, which don't get me wrong, I did that like 9 years ago. It is not that hard, but doing this such that it's actually going to work every single time. It's going to be so fast that you never even notice it. That takes a lot of very, very high quality engineering work. And so one of my objectives has been, I want to build a culture and a company where anybody that is excited about this mission and this approach and this product can come work here and have a good working environment, right? And I'd say, we have folks from all across the political spectrum. We have folks that from all across the sort of gun ownership spectrum who've all come together to work directly on this product because like they see this as an exciting, pragmatic solution to, hey, like we can build a better product that hopefully lots of people will want to buy that, if people choose to adopt, would also prevent at least children and teenagers in many cases from getting access to firearms. And so again, I just want to be very clear. we are not claiming at all, and you'll never see this from any of lots of other people have said things like this about us, but we never claim this first party. We're not going to prevent all gun deaths in America, right? Especially not violent crime, et cetera. But if we can save one kid's life, right, I think that's a big positive outcome. And at the same time, again, as a big gun owner myself, I think firearms are going to continue to be a part of American culture, one way or the other forever, right? Like there's not some world I see that firearms are not going to continue to be a part of our culture. And so my approach has always been, how can we sort of solve for the challenge of like, there's a lot more kids dying from guns than I think anybody wants. But also like recognizing that like guns are here to stay.
I think that's, for lack of a better way of putting it, that is fucking fascinating, because when people, I mean, myself included, when we hear smart gun, when we hear tech company, our immediate reaction is to sort of put the wall up, put the guard up, and just assume an anti-gun perspective. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't sound, it does not sound like you come from that sort of mentality. And that's really interesting. Now, I do know that there are some folks within Silicon Valley, within these big tech companies, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, there are some people that are quote unquote pro-gun. I don't know their entire stance, but I'm not going to die on that hill, but I do know that there are some people that are fervently pro-gun at these companies. And it's really fascinating to hear you stand essentially in the middle saying, we aim to save lives with this technology, and we know guns aren't going anywhere and we don't want them to go anywhere. That is really interesting from my perspective. Now, one of the things that you do, obviously it's got the sensors and only registered users can set this up. One of the number one things that comes up when we talk about smart guns here on the Gun Collective is the idea that the data will be used against us in some way. Is that at all possible with this system?
Short answer is no, right? And the reason why I can say that with confidence is we've designed the sort of cybersecurity approach, if you will, against what I would consider to kind of be the most challenging possible adversary, which is ourselves. And so what I mean by that is...
Okay, I was going to ask you to expand on that.
Yeah. And so basically, we've designed this product such that even if Biofire was compelled for whatever reason to try to gain access to it, like you've seen this with Apple and other technology companies, where there's never any data even on there that anybody would consider to be sensitive. And like there's no data being stored, there's no real world identities, the biometric data is stored encrypted and hashed such that it can never be turned back into like a picture of your face or fingerprint or anything. But also like, even getting access to that, Biofire doesn't have access to any of the encryption keys and other sort of credentials that are used inside of the firearm to protect that data, right? Those credentials are actually generated by the device itself inside of a secure root of trust during manufacturing, right? So they've never gone.
So you essentially, you essentially create a schematic of encryption, and you say use this to encrypt the data, but the actual dock and firearm together encrypt that data. Are you using like Okay, so are you using like rolling encryption? Is it different every time? How does that function?
Yeah, I would say the high level answer is we use sort of what's considered to be best practice, which is hardware security elements. So these are super secure little chips, basically, that are extremely tamper resistant. They're very, very, very hard to gain access to. They benefit from all of the latest and greatest advancements in sort of physical security. And what those chips do is they basically generate what's called a cryptographic secret. In our case, we use many different kinds of cryptographic secrets, but they generate a cryptographic secret. And then that secret is what is used to encrypt the internal communications of the gun. And basically everything that's happening inside the system is protected with those credentials. The key thing, though, again, is those are not credentials that are generated on some Biofire server and then injected into the device, right? Which, like, for what's worth, like there are worlds where that does make sense. Like, for example, we offer optional software updates, right? You're never compelled to do a software update. You have to choose to apply any update, and the owner has to confirm with their biometrics. We do, just like any responsible company, like we sign our software updates with credentials saying, hey, like this is a real software update from Biofire, but you're not required to apply them. But all the actual customer data, again, is encrypted on the device by credentials that have never been seen by Biofire.
So you talked about software updates. How does that happen? Are
Yep.
you using an SD card? Is it wireless? What is it?
Yeah, so there's a couple different options there. I think backing up a step, I'd love to talk about kind of how the dock and the gun interact a little bit.
Sure,
The
please.
gun has no, as I said kind of very briefly previously, has no wireless communications of any kind. No Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, anything like that. There's no RF antennas. There's no ability for the gun to communicate with anything wirelessly. We encourage, as we start shipping these products, we encourage people to take them apart and verify that there's no antennas in there. There's no way it could possibly ever do that from a hardware perspective. The only way it can talk is through that USB port. That's, I think, super important to us because the number one reason why I can say, yeah, your gun's never going to be hacked, like it can't be disabled remotely, anything like that, is if there's no way to access it remotely, hard stop, well, then there's nothing to do. And I can be clear, we do lots and lots of security work on top of that, but that is really the key part of like, if it can't be connected to the internet, then it doesn't matter.
Sure.
The dock, as I said previously, the dock and the gun don't trust each other, right? So the gun will never release any information to the dock until the owner has presented their biometrics and confirmed that they want to release that information. Even when you first plug it in, you get basically a quick status readout from all the sort of internal maintenance systems that says, hey, is the gun, doesn't need cleaning, anything like that. Even that is like all information that you could see just by looking at the outside of the gun. Any sort of additional detail requires the owner to confirm with their biometrics.
So when you're saying confirmed, you have to like grip the gun, stand behind it while it's in the dock. Is that the idea?
Exactly. Yeah. And we've got a couple of videos I can send over, but basically the concept is once it's inserted in the dock will prompt you as, hey, like, please log in. And to do that, you actually have to grip the firearm. The lights will go green, right? Just like you unlocked it. In fact, it actually is unlocked. If you were to pull it out of the dock, it'd be able to fire. But then that also authorizes, if it's connected to the dock and everything's gone right there, it also will authorize, hey, like, yes, I want to release temporarily like some limited information about the maintenance status or like the list of users so that I can add and change users, things like that. None of that data is ever stored, never sent anywhere. It just exists temporarily while the user's interacting with it. The dock has basically optional Wi-Fi in it. So it's turned off by default. And I want to be very clear, this is not some like subscription enabled product or anything like that. Like you can buy one of our products and never talk to Biofire ever again and never connect it to the internet, and you'll get a great experience and it'll work out great for you. If you do choose to enable the Wi-Fi in the dock, it enables other features like basically that there's no way for us to possibly ever provide without connectivity. So the two key ones there are software updates. We do offer an offline option, right? So if you want to, you can download the software update from our website onto a flash drive and then plug the flash drive into the dock and do it that way as well. So even if you choose not to connect to the Wi-Fi, you can still get access to software updates. And then there are certain features, like for example, we've had a lot of our customers ask for, hey, I want a notification on my phone if my gun is like removed from the dock or if somebody's touched it or something like that. Very similar to what you've seen from like a lot of the like smart safe companies.
Right.
We can definitely provide features like that, and we intend to, but those do require some kind of connectivity. So if you want features that are dependent on connectivity, you have to connect it to the internet, but otherwise none of the other features require that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest concerns that a lot of people have, especially, I mean, for God's sake, I saw an article yesterday that said Toyota was hacked or lost or access to, I don't know what it was, some level of a security fuck up where someone was able to gain access to like 10 years of location data on vehicles. And all I could think was, wow, if you really wanted to know someone's patterns, all you have to do is track where they're going all the time. That is terrifying. And this is Toyota. This is a massive multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar company, whatever, how much money they bring in, it doesn't matter.
A lot.
We have seen failure after failure after failure of tech companies losing data, like getting hacked or whatever, whatever terminology, whatever flavor of that we're using for the day. Tech companies have dropped the ball repeatedly. I mean, what was it? The story I used in my news piece was a company called Eufy. Are you familiar with them?
Not.
So they're a subsidiary of Anchor, and Anchor is primarily like charging and that sort of thing, like little batteries. Eufy has a security system, and they were promoting this thing as never storing anything on the cloud, not once ever on the cloud, all stored locally, right? Well, turns out they were definitely 100% storing stuff on the cloud, and including facial recognition data, which is effing terrifying. because that's just straight up. Well, not only on top of that, there's another layer of it being a communist Chinese company.
I was just going to say that, but yes.
That's a problem too. But what do you say when people bring these sorts of concerns to you? Especially, so let's remove the non-connected version, because if you can never gain access, hard stop. Okay, that makes sense to my brain. But if there is some level of Wi-Fi connectivity, what do you do to prevent someone from gaining access to all of this data in that system?
Yeah, so a couple answers to that. One, all the sensitive data never leaves the gun, right? And that's kind of why I was trying to explain some of the differences between the dock and the gun, and that's why we put Wi-Fi in the dock and not in the gun, right? There's no trust relationship between the dock and the gun. So that even if the dock was hacked, which again, there's lots of work we've done on the similar side to make sure that's very, very challenging. But even if it was hacked, it doesn't actually get you access to biometric information or any of the like sensitive data that we have to store, most notably biometrics, to make the gun functional, right? If we don't store, and again, we don't store them, we store hashes, which basically means we're not storing like a picture of your face or anything like that, but we do have to store the enrolled biometric data. Otherwise, we can't provide the kind of fundamental functionality. And when I say we, I mean the gun, but not Biofire. That data, it never leaves the firearm, right? There's no process, there's no way that it would ever be released to the dock. And so it's never in a place where it could be accessed remotely. It's basically like an air gap, makes sense. More broadly, I would say, we encourage folks externally to kind of red team this, right? It's not very complicated from an overall perspective to identify what data is going where. And I would say like where maybe some people are willing to take, random Chinese security system companies at their word. I wouldn't personally, but if it sounds like some folks did. I think there's lots of folks that are very excited to be independently validating our claims, and we encourage them to do that, right? We have a great bug bounty program, like we pay people to identify any issues, as well as more broadly, like this is something where this is kind of the core thing, and we're very happy to stand behind our words here. And again, actually have people go out and prove it independently. I would say we do internally verify obviously everything I'm saying, as well as like do audits and things like that. We expect to release the results of a lot of that. But again, we encourage people to independently verify a lot of these claims and sort of approach. But the design of the system is designed such that there's very, very, very little. The bare minimum amount of data required to provide the functionality that the customer is expecting is stored in any given place.
So for an ultra simple look at the relationship between the gun where the biometric data is stored and the dock itself, it's more like the gun is the parent going yes, no,
correct,
as opposed to yes, here's the data. Is that the ultra simple
fancy keyboard, mouse, and screen, basically, right? Okay, the actual processor, right? Like if you think about like a computer, like the CPU, if you will, is not in the dock, right? It's inside the gun, and all the data and decisions about, should I release some data? Like, should this user be added? Like, is this user the admin? All those kind of really important decisions happen inside of the firearm, and there's no place else that they could happen, if that makes sense.
And that triggers another question in my mind about the electronics contained within. You're saying most of the sort of horsepower is within the firearm itself. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, have you guys done any sort of long-term high round count testing with these things yet? If so, can you share an actual number of rounds?
We've done lots of that kind of testing. I can't share a final number of rounds, but like I would say, and just to be clear, we will be sharing kind of final specifications with everybody.
Once you've got the production version.
Yeah, and before we ask anybody to put their kind of non-refundable like final payment down, right? What we've been doing so far is we're collecting refundable deposits. Again, there's lots and lots of folks that are excited to get in line. But if people feel like we're not living up to what we're saying today, like they're welcome to refund their deposit and move on. Nobody has done that yet, but if they'd like to, they're welcome to. So I would say, like, just because I'm not giving you straight answers on a couple of these like detailed numbers right now, doesn't mean that we are going to be providing those to our customers in advance of asking people to put any non-refundable money down.
Okay.
I would say we've been in testing with this product for about two and a half years. And one of the areas we've invested into quite significantly is the testing process, right? We almost entirely hire aerospace engineers. Is actually the vast majority of our team are folks that have built missiles, satellites, rockets, things like that, because it's one of the industries I think that has solved some of the fundamental challenges of how do you build a complicated electromechanical device that has to, be attached to things that regularly explode, as an example, or needs to never fail. And so we found that the knowledge and expertise from those industries is very powerful, and that's actually one of the main reasons we're here in Colorado. Is there's a lot of really good satellite companies in the area that have some really good talent on the defense and sort of aerospace side. So with all that in mind, I would say the approach has always been to kind of ensure that we're taking care of all those different aspects. And I would say you should expect to see a similar kind of performance. From an actual like electronic survivability, we very carefully designed the entire system to be very shock survivable. It's like the way that I would describe it technically, which means, like obviously we're attaching these to a gun, like it blows up by design. It needs to survive that. And that's not trivial by any means, but it's also not maybe quite as hard as you think it is.
Well, the gun industry has repeatedly proven that it is apparently a difficult thing to do high round counts. I am excited and healthy. I try to retain a healthy level of skepticism to any claims of high round counts.
When I said it's not quite as hard as you think it is, my comment was on the like making electronics survive.
Oh, right, sure. Okay.
It's not trivial, but it's not super challenging. I think it's taken a lot of work for us to iterate through. Hey, like it's one thing to solve all the small challenges that happen when you're at 100 rounds or 200 rounds. It's very different when you're at 10,000 rounds. So like, I'm actually not arguing with that part at all.
Okay, that's good. I think listening to your responses throughout this, you seem to have a very good understanding of where your challenges are going to be and what people are going to say, probably because you've been doing it for 11 damn years.
Talk to a few people about this.
Yeah, just a couple. So the one when we talked about doing this interview, one of the things that came up is I'm trying to figure out who your customer is, because from my perspective, it's not a gun enthusiast. I would argue that a gun enthusiast would 100% shy away from such things based on their passion rooted in traditional firearms. So who are you trying to target as a customer right now?
Yeah, I will say I wouldn't go too far on the gun enthusiasts not being interested, and especially as early adopters.
Yeah, challenge it, dude. Tell me. Tell me the
our
truth.
largest category of customers as early adopters actually generally are what I would call like gun enthusiasts, right? Folks that are into firearms as a hobby, not just as like a tool, if that makes sense. Like obviously sometimes as tools as well, but like are interested independently in firearms as a hobby. The reason for that is what we're building is like fundamentally unlike any firearm that's ever existed before. And one part that we haven't talked about is this is the world's first ever fire-by-wire gun. And so what that actually means, so in a traditional semi-auto handgun, there's a trigger, right? And then you have some mechanical linkages. And sorry, my camera's mirrored. You have some mechanical linkages. Eventually, you have a sear drop that causes the striker to move forward, etc. In our system, and this is unloaded. There's basically no mechanical connection between the trigger and the firing pin, right? So you heard that, pull the trigger, you could hear the striker drop. But the difference is that the trigger there is actually just a fancy switch, and it feels exactly like a normal trigger. You get your take up and your break and your release and all that. And we've done a lot of work to make it feel like a very high quality trigger, but it actually is really just a fancy switch, right? There's no mechanical connection between the trigger and the firing pin. And what that allows us to do is, previously what I was showing you is like, hey, I pick it up and it unlocks super quick and it locks super quick. That's just showing you lights turning on and off. The reason why I can actually say the gun is locked and unlocked as soon as those lights are on or off, and in fact, actually slightly before, is because the electronic fire control system takes less than a millisecond to arm and disarm each time that happens. And so that's actually the key thing that allows us to provide both the reliability, right? Because there's no mechanical locking mechanism or anything like that. It's all just truly electronic, as well as the speed, right? The latency around that. So I would say like, I will answer your question around who our core customer is, which is not gun enthusiasts, to be clear. But I actually think like so far we've seen lots and lots of gun enthusiasts that are interested in buying this because it is a fundamentally very different kind of firearm. Just the same way that, a lot of folks bought like the Silencer Maxim, right? It's like, hey, it's integrally suppressed, it's a fundamental, or the Hudson H9, for example. It's like, this is a fundamentally different kind of firearm. Again, obviously, like some of those worked out, some of them didn't, but you understand the intent. So to answer your question directly, I think where we see this being the most valuable is among home defense, right? And particularly people that are buying maybe their first firearm for home defense or have a single handgun at home, that are less gun enthusiasts, right? And more people that are looking to basically just buy a firearm as a tool. And I think among that demographic, they generally tend to have less experience with firearms. They tend to have less training, right? And unfortunately, that also does tend to mean that they, on average, make a somewhat higher percentage of mistakes, in particular around like securing firearms, things like that. And so I think from where we think we can have the most impact, that is certainly the area. And I also think it's where there's the most sort of unmet need, right? There's the most concern about firearms being unsecured, et cetera. I would say like that's not strictly true, right? Like a lot of our advisors, folks that are again literally coming out of the SEAL teams, who have more experience handling firearms than I ever will in my entire life, even working at Biofire, are some of the most concerned people I've ever met about their firearm security, right? And knowing where that firearm is and having control over it, but they're thinking about it all the time, right? It's where I think with more entry-level folks, like it's a little bit easier to make a mistake, but it's not front of mind at all times. So I would say at a high level, the quick answer is, I think we want to build a firearm that any American that can own a handgun in their jurisdiction is welcome to purchase, and use for whatever purposes they feel is appropriate. We've designed it to be optimal for those sort of more entry-level customers. And I think a good example of this is, you may have noticed previously, there's a visible laser built in. And so you can see, I'm sorry, there's that red dot I'm just on my hand here, but you'll see it's on the wall there as well. Visible lasers are a really interesting topic, right? Because you talk to most gun enthusiasts, right, and sort of professional firearm users, and they'll tell you that visible lasers are stupid, right? Nobody wants them. They give your position away, gives you an additional thing to think about. Like, in general, again, most people have moved away from using visible lasers towards holographic red dot and other kind of technologies like that. What's interesting is we found through our research, the number one thing that we care the most about is, from a product design perspective, is ensuring that the user knows the status of the firearm, right? I want you, as somebody who's using the firearm, to intuitively understand, at a minimum, is the gun locked or unlocked? And sure, that's not that hard to do in like a conference room or at a range, but in the middle of the night where somebody just broke the glass downstairs and you're rolling out of bed still 3/4 asleep and trying to get access to your firearm, things that were very obvious, in a calm environment are suddenly no longer obvious. And so, for example, we did a whole bunch of testing with the sort of indicator lights here, which seem very obvious, right? It's a big green light in your front sight, it's a big green light on the back, and in person, they're quite clear. And we did some testing where we put people and potential customers in sort of simulated threat environments, right? Where we would, we actually set up a bedroom in our loading dock and then turn all the lights off and would have people like slam through the door, et cetera. And we would change the colors randomly, right? We'd make them purple, we'd make them orange. And then we'd ask our customers afterwards, like, well, what color were the lights? I'm like, oh, well, they were green. And no, they weren't, they were purple, right? And so people would many customers would not intuitively understand that. And so we've actually found that visible laser, which turns on automatically when you pick the gun up and will only be on when the gun is unlocked, was by far the most intuitive, sort of easy to understand. Is there a red dot? I'm good to go. No red dot, something's wrong. That being said,
so is that because it's seen downrange? Is that the idea that your brain doesn't process right here, it processes out further? That is, first of all, good on you guys for giving a shit enough to run it through all of these scenarios. Like, regardless of politics and all that kind of shit, you guys seemingly have, like, every time I challenge you with, a fairly basic thing that goes along with smart gun ideas, you have an answer for it that doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I know that there are a lot of things tied to like politics wise with smart guns, but man, this is really interesting. So I'll let you keep going. So the visible red laser is the thing. I'm
almost done. So basically, like, the good news is, hey, I would say, like, again, back to that advisory council, I feel like I brought them up a lot. We put this in front of them, they picked it up, and their first question was like, guys, how can I turn this off? I hate it, right? And that's great. And so what we've been able to do is, the default is that visible laser is going to be on, and it turns on automatically when you pick it up. But all you have to do to change that is you just go to the dock and you just change your personal settings real quick, and then great, it won't turn on automatically. And you can, there's a couple buttons here. There's one right, camera's not focused. There we go. Sorry. There's a button here on this side as well as one on the other side. And those are totally programmable. You can configure them to toggle the laser, as well as, if you have a flashlight flyover cover or a red dot flyover cover, you can configure the behavior of all those. So basically, the punchline is, I think the objective is, and your question was like, what kind of customer are we targeting? It's much more about like, what are the customer that we've designed the product to be best for? And then if other folks see themselves in the product, right, they see it fit in the use case, it's awesome, right? Like we're happy to sell it to you as long as you can, again, legally buy a handgun in your jurisdiction. So I think that's a big piece. I would say, not to like plug somebody else's channel here, but we did a video recently between Brian, who's our head of industrial design, is sort of the man behind a lot of what I've been talking about today from like a user experience perspective. He did a pretty good follow-up interview with Ian over Forgotten Weapons that he talks through our design process and all the different iterations. So if folks want more information than I'm able to just do with my one prototype here today, that's not a bad resource.
Yeah, I have no problem plugging Forgotten Weapons. That is a massive resource. With untold amounts of knowledge being shared over there. So no problem there, guys. If you want to see more in depth on that sort of stuff, definitely go check that out. There's also a bunch of videos on the Biofire. It's smartgun.com. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So we're doing pre-orders at smartgun.com.
Okay. So the last question I'm going to ask you, I want to try and understand this. I would, like I said in the early parts of this talk, I would say that a good chunk of at least my audience, I can't speak for every gun owner out there, they effing hate you. Without talking to you, without that, how do you respond to somebody that thinks you are a problem for gun owners in general?
It's a good question. So I would say there's a couple pieces to this, right? One is I do think we're doing things that are fundamentally actually good for the gun community. And that doesn't mean, again, there's been lots and lots of politics around smart guns, many of which I do not personally agree with. And I would also say fundamentally, all previous attempts at smart guns have been sort of really just absolute shit products, right? Like as a gun owner myself, I would never have owned, whether it was like the Armatix product or otherwise.
Yeah, I remember the Armatix. Yeah.
Like, I use a suppressed SBR as a home defense weapon, right? I'm not.
All right, hold on. You can't just drop that and keep running. Like, you can't just say I use a suppressed SBR. This
I like
arguably
is trying to pay the ATM as much money as I can, right?
Yeah, I mean, arguably, you at least come across as a gun enthusiast, and to my knowledge, that's never happened with a smart gun company. It's always been some tech dickhead trying to make what appears to be a quick buck and ruin this. So continue. What do you say to people that hate you?
Yeah. So what I would say is like folks are entitled to their own opinion, and certainly this is maybe back him step. One of the reasons why we have like continually lobbied against mandates for smart gun technology. There used to be a mandate for smart guns in New Jersey. We were involved in helping get that repealed, and we've been more broadly sort of like every time that some legislature thinks about, oh well, smart guns are kind of cool. We're the first people to call them up and be like, nope, you should not do that. And here's the reasons why. And what we always tell people is, our objective is we want to provide another option, right, in the firearms market, right? And this is, we're building one product. Again, we hope to build many more in the future, but as of right now, we're building one full size, as you said, pretty big, 9mm striker fired handgun designed for home defense, right? At a premium price point, right? Like we do the best we can to make it affordable, but this is a substantially more complicated product to manufacture, and we don't have the scales of the big incumbents, right? So even on the gun side, it's a little bit more expensive for us to manufacture a gun than it is for Glock to do so, as you'd expect. But our objective has always been, this is something that I, from the thousands of gun owners that I've talked to over the years I've been working this is something that I think a lot of folks would be very excited to adopt. And that's awesome. Great. Like we obviously would love to have them buy one of our products. That's why we're a business. At the same time, there's many people who don't see smart gun technology as being value add to their lives or to the way that they own firearms or to their personal concerns and challenges around how they think about firearms. And that's great, right? There's literally thousands of other firearms in the market, and they are welcome to go buy any one of those, right? And I think that really comes back down to, I do see this as a net positive option, right? The reason why is I have fundamentally never talked to a gun owner who wanted their kid to find their gun, right? Obviously. And I think in particular, the accidental suicides, the accidental gun deaths and certain kinds of suicide where people are using other people's firearms are huge percentage of gun deaths, and one that I think is very solvable in a lot of cases. Because it's not, we're not talking about violent crime here. We're not talking about mass shootings where criminals are doing bad things with illegally obtained guns, right? This is where these are responsible gun owners, who have the best intentions, who are, trying to prevent their kids from gaining access to that firearm. So I would say, like, my answer is people are entitled to their own opinions, and I am very firm in our convictions in terms of, I think this is a thing that should exist in the world. I don't think it's something that should be required, right? And again, that, like, we've put our money where our mouth is. You're welcome to go look at who our lobbyists are, and we file all the filings and things like that. And we're not out there advocating for mandates or anything like that. In fact, we're doing just the opposite. And we've seen really, I would say, positive support from folks on the gun side in terms of, again, we're a member of the NSSF. And we've worked closely with them around a lot of this stuff. And again, they don't endorse us, just like they don't endorse any of their members. And I'm not saying that we always agree with every single thing that NSSF does or anything like that. But I would definitely say that our goal is to provide another option. And certainly, I would love to create some pressure and prove that, hey, this is possible, and like have other people also start innovating in this space. But that's a competitive pressure argument. That's not a like this should be required argument. If that makes sense.
Sure. I fully anticipated this to be a more adversarial discussion, having only seen, bits and pieces of you in interviews and never really understanding you as a person and the company vision and, fighting back against the mandates. Like, holy shit, this is crazy to me that a quote unquote smart gun company, I mean, arguably the most viable option fighting against the mandates that would require such a firearm that would financially benefit the company.
It wouldn't, though, right? We're not, like, obviously I think it's the right thing for the world, but it's also like my job is to run a business that makes money, right?
Right. Yeah, arguably. I mean, I don't know. It's a tech company. I don't know.
No, I know, but this tech company, it's a bad market. You're not allowed to do the Uber thing anymore, I don't think. At least I sure hope not. Anyway, so I would say, like, for us, again, I think this available as an option, right? And again, it needs to be reliable, it needs to be trustworthy, it needs to do all the things we've been talking about today. There's no real argument against smart guns being available if that's the case, right? Cool. It's a gun that does exactly what you want in a way that you want it, and you can go choose to buy one if you want, right? Like, it's sure, again, that doesn't mean everybody's going to love it, but I don't think there's actually, like, again, assuming that we deliver on all the things I've talked about today around reliability, et cetera, there's no reason why the technology shouldn't exist. If you start to mandate it, well, great. I can make 100 arguments as to why this is a shit concealed carry weapon, right? I've tried, and like I built a holster, like with a hacksaw, and like I'm not like a small dude. I'm like 6'1", right? Like but like I think you'd need to be like no less than 300 pounds and 6'8" to like be able to conceal carry this, and even that you're pushing it, right? It's not designed for that use case at all, right? It's not like, and so by building a product that people can choose to purchase if they think it's going to be good for their use case, great. If it's a product that's suddenly required in place of a diverse market of thousands of different products, well, it's probably going to suck at like 999 of those, right? And suddenly then we're being held accountable to like, why this isn't a good battle rifle. And like, well, no shit, it's not. It's a handgun, right? So like, you get my point in terms of like, there's not, from a financial perspective, I don't think it would be positive at all for us, because right now we have lots of customers that are super excited to purchase technology, adopt it, be first in line to get it. But like, you start to create the pressure around, well, is this a bad thing, right? Is this going to be required? Like, that's exactly the opposite of what we want, right? So I would say, like, it's not, we're spending money to like try to have successfully fought against and prevent new mandates. And like, the reason for that is because like, that's actually what makes a better business for us, and it's what our customers want.
Wow. I did not expect any of these answers. I honestly was so almost eager to call bullshit.
That's fair.
On.
I mean, come out and try it, but yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, dunking on people is fun. It's fun to shit on people, but that's not required here. I think you've come at this from a really sort of, for lack of a better way of putting it, a libertarian perspective. You can buy it if you want. You don't have to. And that is freaking wild. It is unexpected and pretty interesting. What is next for the company? What like where? So we're here, sort of prototype stage. Where do we go? And then, yeah, what happens after that?
Yeah, so the focus has really been over the past. And I do unfortunately need to run here in about 5 minutes, if that's all right. But
absolutely,
the focus for the past few years has all been about technology, right? Heads down, engineering, right? Solving. There's a bunch of fundamental technical challenges we've had to solve just to do what we have today. The focus moving forward for us is really about continue to scale manufacturing, right? We've been doing low volume, kind of like lots and lots of work around a manufacturing process, obviously, as you expect. Like, this is not some prototype that we then need to go figure out how to manufacture. Like, this is largely being produced already on our production supply chain. We just need to continue to scale it. But that's really the big focus for us, is like, we've seen a lot of demand. As I said, right now the lead time is moving out. And what that means is there's more people ordering than we have the ability to fulfill, right? Because it would go in the other direction if we had more supply than demand. And so our goal is really, it's great to build a really reliable piece of technology, right? That's a good first step and kind of a requirement. But then also every single gun that goes out to one of our customers needs to have that same degree of reliability, right? And so that means as we continue to scale the manufacturing process, it's not just scaling it to be able to deliver as many units as our customers are demanding, but also ensuring that the quality of every single one of those, again, for a product that is quite a bit more complicated than a traditional firearm manufacturer, maintains the same level. So I think we're well positioned to do that. But that's what the focus for the next probably 2 years for us. We're going to be releasing additional products and accessories, things like that. The flashlight and holographic red dot flyover covers are good examples of that are coming down the pipeline here pretty soon. But the goal is very much around making sure that we're scaling that manufacturing process reliably and responsibly to ensure that the quality stays extremely high. So that's like the number one focus for us over the next kind of period here. And then, I think it's always on to the next challenge and trying to build, and solve new problems for customers as people come to us. Like, we've gotten a lot of requests for long guns, shotguns, things like that. None of those are products that we have available right now. But I think we're definitely considering what the next product would look like from a firearm perspective.
I am really curious to see what comes after the release of this and into 24 and 25. I think it's going to be kind of fascinating to see how you handle not only production, of course, but the political landscape that comes along with, nonsense in Washington and at the state level. So I know you got to go. Kai, thank you so much for sharing this time with us. Is there any last thing you want to share? Like, where people, obviously we talked about the website, smartgun.com. Do you want to plug anything else before we wrap?
I have to, it's in the contract, but I'm just kidding. But no, I'd love to plug in terms of, like, if folks are interested in being in line and sort of following the development of the company, best way to do that is to put a deposit down at smartgun.com. It's a $149 deposit, fully refundable. And so that's definitely the easiest way to kind of keep your spot in line. But yeah, that's my plug, is definitely, if folks are interested in potentially owning a smart gun, I would say definitely get your spot now.
Rad. I really do appreciate it.
Likewise.
And if anybody out there has any questions, leave them in the comments and I will try to get them over and get some answers for you guys. I really do appreciate it. As always, check out our sponsors, Blackout Coffee and Vertex. The code is TGC at both of them. They make great stuff. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you.